The net came down out of a sky so black it looked poured, not painted. One heartbeat Selenai was riding the narrow game trail above the San Simon, the wind cool on her bare arms and the taste of juniper on her tongue. The next heartbeat the darkness exploded into motion. Weighted rawhide cords hissed through the air like striking rattlers, iron rings clinking, and the whole thing struck her across the shoulders with the force of a falling tree. Her mare screamed, reared, and was gone, hooves drumming into the night. Sella hit the ground hard enough to knock the stars from her eyes, legs tangled, arms pinned. The breath driven from her lungs in a single involuntary grunt. For one stunned moment she lay staring upward, trying to understand how the sky had become a lattice of ropes. Then the net tightened. Someone had planned this well. The cords were greased bear fat and smoke-cured buffalo sinew, the weights heavy Mexican silver dollars sewn into leather pouches so the snare would drop fast and hold. It was not a thing thrown together by drunks in a saloon. It was a piece of craftsmanship meant for one woman, one tall Apache woman who had made herself too expensive to let live free. She rolled, or tried to. The net only cinched tighter, biting into wrists and ankles until blood ran warm down her forearms. The thorns of the catclaw all around her reached up like eager fingers, snagging the deerskin of her dress, tearing the fringe she had softened with her own teeth when she was 16 and still believed beauty mattered. The smell of crushed creosote rose sharp and bitter. Bootsteps approached, slow and deliberate. A horse snorted somewhere close, then quieted, as though its rider had pressed a warning hand to its muzzle. A lantern lifted into view, carried low so the light struck upward and carved the bearer's face into hard angles and bottomless shadows. A long duster the color of dried blood hung open over a dark shirt and cartridge belt. The lower half of his face was hidden by a bandana the shade of fresh liver. Only his eyes showed above it, pale as Winter Creek ice, unblinking. He squatted just outside the reach of her bound legs and set the lantern on a flat rock. The glow painted the iron rings of the net in dull red. Sella Naui, he said, tasting the syllables the way a man tastes strong whiskey. His Spanish carried a gringo twist, vowels flattened by years spent north of the line. Reed that bends but never breaks. That what your mother named you? She said nothing. She was counting heartbeats, measuring the pull of the cords, memorizing the smell of him, tobacco, horse sweat, gun oil, and something sharper underneath, like metal left in the rain. $5,000 alive, he went on, voice almost conversational. 3 if someone brings your scalp to Tombstone. Colonel Carr was real specific about the braid. Said he wants to hang it from his saddle horn. The name struck her like a slap, but she kept her face still. Evelyn Carr's father. Of course. The lieutenant had come to her camp last April with a white flag and a smile too soft for the desert, offering marriage, offering peace, offering ownership. She had laughed until he grabbed her wrist. The knife had gone in under his chin and out the top of his skull so fast. He had probably died still smiling. The man in the duster tilted his head. They call you the Apache Amazon in the saloons. Say you stand 6'3" in moccasins and can put an arrow through a silver dollar at 100 paces. Say you burned the railroad camp at Dos Cabezas and left no survivors. I've been tracking you since the Dragoon Mountains, woman. You cover ground like smoke. He reached into his coat and drew a folded paper. Let it fall open so the lantern caught the printing. Reward. Her face stared back from a bad woodcut. High cheekbones. Straight nose, eyes that even in cheap ink looked ready to kill. $5,000. Dead or alive. Beneath it someone had scrawled in red pencil. Prefer alive. Carr wants her to beg. Sella tasted copper where she had bitten her tongue. She forced her voice steady. You know my name, Bounty Man. What do they call you when the dogs are not listening? He considered her for a long moment, then reached up and tugged the bandana down. The face underneath was younger than she expected, maybe 35, lean and sunburned, a scar crossing the bridge of his nose like someone had tried to erase him once and failed. A thin line of beard traced his jaw, going gray early. "Pike," he said. "Just Pike." He drew a knife from his boot, Green River blade, long as her forearm, and tested the edge with his thumb. A bead of blood welled. "Hold still," he said. "I'd rather not cut you more than I have to." Colonel's particular about the merchandise arriving pretty. He leaned in to slice the cords at her ankles, staying carefully beyond the kick of her legs. The lantern threw his shadow across her like a second net. That was when the wind shifted. It came from the north, carrying the smell of burning creosote and the faint jingle of Mexican silver spurs. Another light appeared farther down the dry wash, a torch. Then two more, then 5, bobbing as riders picked their way through the chaparral. Voices drifted on the night air, Spanish, laughing, drunk with mezcal and greed. "A rail, gringo." One shouted. "You did the hard work for us, huh? We take the devil woman now. Save you the long ride." Pike froze, knife poised above the rawhide. His pale eyes flicked toward the torches, counted, came back to her. The leader of the newcomers rode into the circle of lantern light on a blaze-faced gelding. He was thick through the chest, silver conchos flashing across his jacket, a gold tooth glinting when he grinned. 5 more men fanned out behind him, rifles balanced easy across their saddles. She recognized the brand on their horses, Bar Cross out of Sonora. Scalp hunters who sold to both sides of the border and laughed about it afterward. The gold-toothed one, Valdez. Pike had called him, rested a Henry rifle across his pommel, and spoke in slow, insulting English. "Paper says she belongs to the Gringo Army, Pike, but out here paper is for wiping your ass. We take her to Hermosillo. The governor there pays 3,000 American for tall Apache bitches. Enough to buy many bottles and many women who don't bite." Pike stood slowly, knife still in his right hand, left hand drifting toward the Colt on his hip. "Paper also says any man who interferes gets the same reward on his own head. You want to die for 3,000 pesos, Valdez." Valdez laughed, a sound like breaking pottery. 6 rifles against 1, amigo. Even the famous Pike cannot shoot the moon down. Sella felt the net slacken a fraction as Pike's weight shifted off the cords. She twisted her left wrist, found the knot she had been working with her teeth while they talked, and pulled. Rawhide parted with a soft pop. Blood rushed back into her fingers, pins and needles fierce as fire. Pike's voice dropped to a whisper meant only for her ears. "When the shooting starts, roll left. My Henry's on the saddle. Quiver's full." She met his eyes. "Why help me?" "Because I'd rather collect 5,000 than die for it tonight." Valdez spat. "Enough talk. Drop the iron, Pike, or we start with your knees." Pike smiled then, a thin, hard smile with no warmth in it. "Come take it." The first shot came from Valdez's rifle, a flat crack that shattered the night. Pike was already moving, diving sideways, Colt roaring answer. The lantern exploded in a bloom of burning coal oil. Sudden darkness swallowed everything. Broken only by muzzle flashes strobing like summer lightning. Sella rolled, felt the net tear free of the thorns, clawed across the sand until her hands closed on the fallen Henry rifle and the quiver still strapped to Pike's saddle. An arrow slid into her palm as if it had waited there all night for her fingers. A bandito loomed over Pike's fallen lantern, shotgun rising. Sella rose to her full height, tall as a lodgepole against the stars, and sent the arrow through his open mouth before the shotgun could speak. The man dropped without a sound. Another rider wheeled toward her, cursing. She worked the Henry's lever smooth as breathing, crack, 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 3 shots so fast they sounded like one long cough. The rider folded over his pommel and was gone, then silence, broken only by the hiss of burning grass, where the lantern had spilled, and the wet gurgle of a dying man somewhere in the dark. She stood over the ruin of the fight, chest heaving, blood running warm down her arms from a dozen small cuts. Smoke drifted lazy across the arroyo, carrying the smell of powder and hot iron. Pike was on his knees 10 paces away, shirt dark with blood at the ribs, pressing one hand to his side. His Colt was empty. The slide locked back. He looked up at her, pale eyes catching starlight. Guess that makes us even. He rasped. Sila knocked another arrow and drew the bow until the stave creaked. We are not even. Pike who catches women, she said. But tonight you do not die. She stepped forward, tall and terrible in the dying firelight, dress torn to ribbons, hair loose and wild as a war banner. Behind her the net lay in pieces, rawhide cords twitching like cut snakes. The desert held its breath, waiting to see what a woman set free would do next. And somewhere far off, a coyote began to sing, as if the night itself had decided the hunt was only beginning. The moon had slid behind the Palancillos by the time Sella dragged Pike into the ruins of the old Butterfield Station at Doubtful Canyon. The walls still stood, adobe scarred by bullets and fire from the Apache wars 15 years gone, but the roof was only ribs of charred vigas and a few scraps of latilla. Wind moaned through the gaps like a woman remembering every man who ever left her. Pike was half conscious, boots carving furrows in the dust as she hauled him by the armpits. Blood soaked his shirt in a dark bib. The shotgun pellets had torn a furrow along his left ribs deep enough to show white bone when she ripped the cloth away. He smelled of iron and sweat and the sour bite of pain. She dropped him against the north wall where the wind couldn't reach, and went back for the horses. Pike's big bay had stayed, ground-tied by habit, but Valdez's blaze-faced gelding had bolted south with the others. 2 mounts were enough. She unsaddled, rubbed them down with a fistful of Saccatone, then picketed them inside the station where the walls would hide their shapes from anyone riding the old stage road. When she came back, Pike was trying to stand. His legs wouldn't hold him. He slid down the wall again, cursing in a whisper. "Lie still, fool," she said in Spanish. "You want your guts on the ground?" He laughed once, wet and small. Already halfway there. She built a fire no bigger than a sombrero, using dead ocotillo stalks that burned hot and left almost no smoke. Then she knelt, rolled him onto his right side, and cut the rest of his shirt away with his own bowie. The wound was ugly. 8 or 9 pellets had plowed a shallow canyon through muscle, tearing skin into ragged petals. A couple more inches to the left and his heart would have stopped in the arroyo. She heated the blade in the fire until it glowed dull red, then poured a stream of mezcal from his own flask over the torn flesh. Pike arched, teeth clamped so hard she heard enamel crack, but no sound escaped. When the mezcal was gone, she pressed the flat of the knife against the worst bleeders. The smell of burning meat rose sharp and intimate. After that she chewed beargrass and creosote leaves until her mouth was green pulp, spat the mash into the wound, and packed it tight with a strip torn from her own petticoat. Pike watched her through slitted eyes, sweat shining like frost on his forehead. "You do that like you've been doctoring men all your life," he rasped. "I have," she said. "My brother took a mini-ball at Apache Pass. I kept him alive 3 days with nothing but willow bark and prayer. He died anyway." She tied the bandage with square knots that would not slip. When she finished, Pike's breathing had eased a little. The firelight painted the scar across his nose bronze. "You could have left me back there," he said. "Taken my horse, my rifle, my scalp. 5,000 on my head, too. Once word gets out I lost you." "I do not sell men for money," she answered. "Only kill them when they deserve it." She sat back on her heels and studied him openly. Without the bandana and the duster he looked smaller, almost ordinary, sunburned neck, collarbone sharp under the skin, old powder burns on his right hand. Only the eyes were still winter water. "Why 5,000?" she asked. "Most Apache women are worth 200 if the hair is long." "Why me?" Pike closed his eyes. For so long she thought he had slipped into fever sleep. "Then, because you killed Evelyn Carr, Colonel's only son. Boy came to your camp with a white flag and a ring in his pocket. Thought he could buy peace the old way, one woman for one war. You sent him home across his saddle with his own knife in his throat." Sella felt the old rage stir, hot and clean. "He grabbed my wrist. Said the governor would make me his wife whether I wished it or not. Sighed Apache women should be grateful for white seed." Pike opened his eyes again. "Doesn't matter to the colonel. He wants your head on a pike outside Fort Bowie. Wants to watch the crows pick your eyes while he drinks coffee on the porch." He coughed, tasted blood, spat to the side. "I took the contract because 5,000 buys a man clear to Oregon. Clear of borders, clear of memories. Been riding other men's hate for 10 years. Figured yours would be the last. And now? Now I'm bleeding in a burned-out stage station with the one woman in creation who has every reason to gut me, and she's sewing me up instead." He managed half a grin. "Reckon the saints got a sense of humor after all." Sella fed the fire another stalk. Sparks rose, died against the broken roof, outside. The wind shifted again, bringing the smell of rain far off in the Madre. Somewhere a nighthawk called. Lonely as a widow, she moved to the doorway and stood listening. No hoofbeats, no jingle of bridle chains. Only the desert breathing. Still, she did not trust the quiet. Valdez had friends. The border was thick with men who would ride 3 days for a chance at $5,000 and a tall woman to break. She came back and sat cross-legged opposite Pike, Bowie knife across her knees. "Tomorrow," she said, "we ride south. My Uncle Nana has a rancheria in the Sierra Madre. The soldiers do not go there. You will heal or you will die, but you will not betray me to them." Pike studied her face in the firelight. "You trust me that far?" "I trust the hole in your side," she said. "It will slow you if you run." He laughed, then groaned as the motion tore at the wound. "Fair enough, Amazon." Silence settled, thick as wool. The fire burned lower. Pike's eyes drifted shut. Sella watched him sleep, or pretend to. She thought of the net again, how the ropes had bitten, how the sky had vanished. She had spent 30 years refusing cages, the Catholic sisters who tried to cut her hair at San Xavier, the reservation agent who wanted her thumbprint on a paper that would trade her freedom for beef and blankets, the lieutenant who thought a woman's body was territory to annex. She looked at Pike's face, slack now in pain and exhaustion, and wondered what new cage she had just built with her own hands by dragging him here. Hours later, when the fire was only coals and the horses dozed hip-shot in the corner, Pike spoke without opening his eyes. "You ever think about quitting?" His voice was a threat. "Just riding until the maps run out?" "Every day," she said. "Where would you go?" She considered. "North, where the buffalo still walk in herds so big they darken the plains. Or west until the water is too salty to drink and the sun drowns every night. Honey where the wind has no master." He was quiet so long she thought he slept again. Then, "Take me with you when you go." She felt something shift inside her chest, like a stone rolling over to show the raw earth beneath. "You are a white man with a price on my head," she said softly. "I was," he answered. "Maybe I'm done being that man." She did not reply. She fed the coals one last ocotillo stalk and watched the flames lick upward, painting the ruined walls the color of fresh blood. Dawn came pale and cold, creeping through the broken doorway like a thief. Sella was already up, saddling the horses, checking cinches, filling canteens from the tiny seep at the back of the station that had kept stage passengers alive 20 years ago. Pike woke when she shook his shoulder. "Can you ride?" she asked. "I've ridden worse," he said, but his face went gray when she helped him stand. She looped his arm over her shoulder. He was taller by an inch or two, but fever had stolen his strength and half carried him to the bay. He mounted like an old man, biting back sounds that would have shamed him. She swung up bareback on the smaller horse she had taken from Valdez's string, a tough little dun with one white eye and a heart like flint. She handed Pike the reins to his own mount and a rifle she had cleaned and loaded while he slept. "South," she said, pointing toward the blue haze where the mountains rose like the spine of some sleeping god. "We follow the arroyos until the soldiers' maps mean nothing." Pike settled the Winchester across his thighs and looked at her for a long moment. "Lead on." "Amazon," he said. "She need the dun forward." And the bay followed without needing guidance. Behind them the ruined station fell away, walls crumbling back into the desert that had birthed them. Ahead lay the long ride into Mexico, into mountains where the Apache still wrote their own laws with bullets and silence. Neither spoke of what waited there, healing or ambush, alliance or betrayal. For now the sun was rising red over the desert, gilding the sage and the thorns, and two riders, one tall as lightning, one bleeding but stubborn, rode south with the wind at their backs and every bounty hunter on the border, suddenly hunting the wrong trail. The net that had caught the sky was only scraps of rawhide now, blowing across the sand like dead tumbleweeds, and somewhere far behind, the bodies in the arroyo had already begun to feed the crows. The Sierra Madre swallowed them whole. One moment they were riding the last open ridge above the pine line. The next the mountains folded shut behind them like a bear trap made of stone and snow. The air turned so thin and cold it cut the lungs. Pines grew straight and black against the sky, their trunks scarred by lightning, their branches heavy with snow that fell in soft, deliberate avalanches whenever the wind remembered its own name. Sella led Pike along a trail only deer and Apache had ever used. The horses stepped high, breaking through crust that rang like thin iron. Ice crystals hung in the horses' manes and in Sella's hair until she looked, crowned with starlight. Pike's fever had come back the night they crossed the border. It rode him now like a second rider, burning behind his eyes, making the world shimmer at the edges. He stayed in the saddle by will alone. Teeth clenched so hard his jaw ached out they reached the hidden valley at dusk. From the ridge it looked like a bowl. Someone had punched into the roof of the world. A long green meadow ringed by cliffs. A thin silver river threading the bottom, smoke rising in pale ribbons from wickiups half buried in pine duff. 23 lodges, maybe 25. Children's voices drifted up, thin and bright as birdsong. Dogs barked once, then fell silent when they scented Sella. She reined in and sat motionless, letting the camp see her. Pike halted beside her, swaying. Snow slid from a pine branch and struck his shoulder with a soft explosion of white. "They will not cheer," she said quietly. "I have been gone 2 years. Many thought me dead. And I bring a white man with blood on his shirt." Pike tried for a grin. It felt more like a grimace. "I'm housebroken, mostly." She almost smiled. Almost they rode down the switchback trail single file. Warriors appeared between the trees, silent, painted for war even in winter, rifles carried easy. Nana waited in the center of the meadow, wrapped in a blanket the color of storm clouds, his face carved deep by 70 winters of fighting Mexico and the United States both. His eyes were black obsidian, unreadable. Sella dismounted and walked forward until she stood an arm's length from her uncle. She spoke in Chiricahua, low and fast. "This is the man who hunted me. He built the net. He also cut me free when the Mexicans came to steal me. He took pellets meant for my back. His wound rots. I owe him a life." Nana never looked at her. His gaze bored into Pike like an auger through pine. Pike slid from the saddle, more fell than dismounted, and stood swaying. The fever made the world pulse red at the edges. 20 rifles tracked his smallest motion. Nana spoke in Spanish, slow and deliberate. The way a man speaks when he wants every word to land like a thrown rock. "You wear the stink of bounty papers." Blanco. "I did," Pike answered, voice raw. "I'm trying to wash it off." A long silence. Snow hissed through the pines. Nana stepped close enough that Pike smelled bear grease and tobacco on him. The old man reached out, pressed 2 fingers against the bloody bandage at Pike's ribs, and pushed. Pain flared white-hot. Pike's knees buckled. Only pride kept him upright. "You will live or die by Apache law," Nana said. "No gun inside the circle. No horse without permission. You work like any man here or you feed the ravens. Understand?" Pike met the black eyes. "Understand." Nana turned to Tsella. "He sleeps at the edge of camp. Your aunties will doctor him. If he lifts hand or eye wrong, I will kill him myself." Tsella inclined her head. "He will not." They gave Pike a small wickiup near the river, half collapsed, its door facing the cliff so the wind screamed straight in. 2 old women, Nana's sisters, both widows of Tres Castillos, took charge of him without ceremony. They stripped him by firelight, peeled away the crusted bandage, and clucked at the smell. Pus ran yellow and thick. One heated a knife while the other poured pine pitch tea down his throat until he gagged. Then the knife opened the wound again, scraping dead flesh while he bit a cedar stick in half. They packed the cavity with moss that smelled of lightning, and wrapped him in a blanket stiff with old blood. He passed out to the sound of women singing, low. Fierce, very old, weeks blurred, fever came in waves. Some mornings he woke clear-headed and ravenous. Others he thrashed and called out names from a Missouri farm that no longer existed. Sella came every night with broth thick with deer heart and wild onion. She sat across the fire and watched him drink, saying little. When the fever was worst, she lay beside him fully dressed, one arm across his chest so she would feel if his heart stuttered. One night he woke to find her asleep, cheek against his shoulder, breath warm on his neck. Snowlight filtered through the smoke hole and painted her face silver. He studied the faint scar along her jaw. He had never noticed it before and felt something inside him crack open, like thin ice under a horse's hoof. He did not move until dawn. Afraid to break whatever fragile thing had settled between them, winter hardened. Snow lay hub deep. The river froze along the edges. Children slid on it shrieking with laughter while old women beat blankets against rocks to drive the cold out. When Pike could walk without falling, he began to earn his keep. He fixed a broken travois pole with rawhide and willow withes. He showed the boys how to braid a hackamore that would not cut a horse's nose. He played cards with the old men, monte, poker, anything, and lost on purpose until they decided he was not entirely stupid for a white man. Lozana, a sharp-tongued widow with a laugh like breaking pottery, brought him jerky and teased him about his beard going gray at the edges. At night, Sella taught him Chiricahua words. He taught her the English curses he had learned riding with the James boys. They laughed more than either had, laughed in years. One evening the sky cleared after a 3-day storm and the temperature dropped so fast the pines cracked like rifle shots. They walked upstream along the frozen river, boots crunching, breath hanging in white clouds. Pike spoke first. "You ever think the world's too small for people like us?" She glanced sideways. "Every day. I mean it. Everywhere I rode, Kansas, Texas, New Mexico, there was always a rope waiting. Someone wanting to own me or kill me. Thought 5,000 on your head would be my ticket out. Turns out the rope was inside me all along." Sella stopped walking. The river ice glowed blue in the starlight. You are not the first man to discover that, she said softly. My father said the same before the Mexicans hanged him from a cottonwood. Said the worst cage is the one you build with your own hate. She reached up and touched the scar across his nose, old from a Yankee bayonet at Centralia. You still building that cage, Pike? He caught her hand, held it against his cheek. Her palm was calloused from bowstring and reins. Warm despite the cold. Not tonight, he said. They stood like that until the northern lights flared, green and purple across the sky, something neither had ever seen so far south. The whole valley seemed to hold its breath. Pike felt the years of blood and whiskey and sleepless nights fall away like old scabs. He bent and kissed her, slow, careful, asking. She answered with a hunger that surprised them both, arms sliding inside his coat, fingers digging into his back hard enough to bruise. They sank to their knees in the snow without feeling the cold, mouths searching, hearts hammering against each other like two drums calling the same war song. Later, lying tangled under his coat, breath fogging the air, she traced the puckered scar along his ribs. This will always remind you, she whispered. Good, he said. I never want to forget what almost killed me. Or what saved me. Spring crept in sideways. First a thaw along south-facing slopes, then the madroco trees bleeding red fruit, then the sound of running water everywhere. The warriors began sharpening arrows and oiling rifles. Scouts rode in with news that made Nana's face grow still as carved stone. Colonel Carr had persuaded the Mexican government to let him cross the border with 200 men and 2 Gatling guns. They were burning rancherias from Casas Grandes to Bavispe, asking one question: where is the tall woman who killed my son? One night the council drum spoke until the stars themselves seemed to listen. Pike was not invited, but Sella came to his wickiup afterward, eyes bright with decision and fear. We ride at dawn, she said. Ojo de Caballo Canyon. The women and children go higher, to the caves only eagles know. 28 warriors will make the soldiers remember why they fear these mountains. She hesitated, then added, Nana says the white man may ride north alone if he wishes. No one will stop him. Pike was already pulling on his boots. Tell Nana I've come too far to start running now. She started to protest, something about debts already paid, about white men and promises, but he cupped her face in both hands and kissed her quiet. I put the net on you once, he said against her mouth. I will stand between you and every net they ever weave again. Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. Apache women do not cry in front of men they might have to bury. At dawn the war party rode out, 28 riders wrapped in wool blankets and silence. Rifles across their thighs, faces painted black with charcoal and bear grease. Nana led. Sella rode second, hair braided tight, bow slung, war club at her knee. Pike brought up the rear, Winchester in the scabbard, the old Bowie at his belt, scar tissue pulling with every breath. Behind them the rancheria vanished into morning mist. Ahead lay Ojo de Caballo, where the canyon walls rose red and sheer, and the only law was gravity, laid, and the will to live free. Sella looked back once. Snow still crowned the highest peaks behind her, catching the first light like burning glass. She raised her bow in salute. Pike lifted the Winchester in answer. Then the mountains closed around them, and the wind began to sing the oldest Apache song of all, the one about a people who would rather die on their feet than live on their knees. Far below, in the valley they had left, a single eagle circled once above the empty wickiups and flew south, following the war party into whatever dawn waited. Ojo de Caballo was a trap built by the gods themselves. A single narrow throat opened between red sandstone walls 500 feet high. Then the canyon widened into a bowl half a mile across. The only way out was the way you came in. Apache had used it for 100 years to bleed armies dry. Cochise here in 61. Victorio in 80, Nana twice. The floor was littered with rusted canteens, broken sabers, and bones that had never been buried. When the wind blew down the throat, it sounded like a dying stallion screaming. They reached it at first light. Nana split the war party like a knife through deer fat. 12 warriors with rifles vanished up goat trails to the rim. 8 more took positions among the boulders that had fallen from the cliff centuries ago. The remaining 8, Sella among them, rode openly down the center of the canyon, lances raised, blankets flapping like war flags. Pike rode with them, Winchester across his saddle, heart hammering so hard he tasted iron. The plan was simple and brutal. Lure Carr's column into the bowl. Let the Gatling guns waste ammunition on shadows, then drop the sky on them. They waited. The sun climbed. Heat shimmered off the rocks. A lizard skittered across Pike's boot and vanished into a crack. Somewhere high above, a raven croaked once and fell silent. Then they came. First the scouts, 4 troopers in sweat-stained blue, eyes wide at the sight of Apaches riding bold as brass. They wheeled and galloped back. Minutes later the bugle sounded, brassy and arrogant. The column poured through the throat, 200 men, 2 Gatlings on mule-drawn limbers, a mountain howitzer, guidons snapping. Colonel Evelyn Carr rode at the front on a blood-bay stallion, hat plume stirring, face burned raw by sun and grief. When he saw Sella in the center of the Apache line, he stood in his stirrups and screamed her name like a curse. Sella raised her bow in mocking salute. Carr drew his saber and pointed. The Gatlings were unlimbered in seconds, crews spinning cranks. The first burst shredded the air, a tearing canvas roar. Bullets whined off stone, kicked dust devils 30 feet high. The Apaches scattered like quail, riding for the boulder field. Pike felt the wind of a slug tug his hat brim. Another burned across the bay's rump. The horse screamed and bolted. Pike let it run, guiding with knees alone, following Sella into the maze of rock. Then the rims erupted. 20 rifles spoke at once from above, smoke blooming white against the blue. Soldiers fell as if a giant hand swept them from their saddles. Horses reared, tangled, went down kicking. The Gatlings tried to elevate, but the crews had dug no pits. Bullets found them in the open. One gun captain spun and fell across his weapon, blood spraying the crank. The second Gatling kept firing, chewing stone to gravel, until an Apache above stood bold on the rim and put 3 shots through the gunner's head. Carr bellowed orders no one could hear over the roar. The howitzer fired once. The shell burst high against the cliff, showering the canyon with rock splinters that screamed like shrapnel. A warrior beside Pike took a fragment through the throat and died without a sound. Sella was off her horse now, moving like smoke among the boulders, bow singing. Pike saw her rise on a rock, draw to the ear, loose. An officer 50 yards away clapped a hand to his eye and toppled backward off his horse. She knocked again before the body hit the ground. Pike levered the Winchester, firing steady, picking targets. A sergeant trying to rally a squad, a bugler raising his horn, a lieutenant waving men toward cover that didn't exist. The scar along his ribs pulled with every recoil, but the pain felt clean, righteous. The soldiers broke. They had come expecting a running fight against scattered hostiles. Instead, they were bleeding in a bowl with no back door. Men threw down rifles and ran for the throat. The Apaches let them go. Warriors did not waste bullets on fleeing rabbits. Then Carr did the thing that ended it. He spurred his blood bay straight at the boulders where Sella stood, saber raised, screaming his dead son's name. His plume had been shot away. Blood ran from a scalp wound, turning his face into a red mask. He saw only the tall woman who had killed his boy. Sella stepped into the open, bow drawn. Pike saw the Colt in Carr's hand rise at the same instant. He kicked the bay forward, slammed between them. The bullet took him high in the left shoulder, spinning him half out of the saddle. He felt the impact like a sledgehammer, kept his seat by locking one arm through the reins. The bay reared, hooves pawing the sky. Carr's horse crashed into them. The colonel fired again, wild. The slug tore Pike's hat away. Sella's arrow took Carr through the open mouth as he screamed. The iron head burst out the back of his neck in a spray of red. He dropped the Colt, clutched the shaft, toppled backward. His boot caught in the stirrup. The terrified stallion bolted, dragging the colonel bouncing and broken across the canyon floor until the boot tore free and the body lay still. Plume finally trampled into the dust. Silence fell, sudden and enormous. Only the wind still screamed down the throat. Pike slid from the saddle, knees hitting stone. Blood poured hot down his chest, soaking the old bandage. Vision tunneled. He saw Sella running toward him, bow forgotten, face stripped of every mask she had ever worn. She caught him before he fell all the way, easing him down among the boulders. Her hands pressed the new wound, already slick. "You stupid, stubborn man," she whispered, voice cracking on the edges. "I told you death was easy here." He tried to laugh. It came out a cough. "Worth it. To see you free." Around them the warriors were moving among the fallen soldiers, gathering rifles, cutting throats of the wounded who might talk. Nana stood on a rock above, face painted black and terrible, watching the throat for any second wave that never came. Sella tore her sleeve, wadded it, pressed harder. Blood seeped between her fingers like accusations. "Stay with me," she ordered. "You do not get to die for me today." Pike's eyes found hers. "Not dying," he rasped, "just collecting interest on that debt." She laughed once, broken, incredulous, and kissed him hard, tasting blood and gunpowder and something that might have been forever. They carried him out on a travois when the sun stood overhead and the canyon stank of death. The warriors rode singing low victory songs, scalps dangling from lance tips. Nana himself tied Carr's plume to his own lance as a joke the mountain spirits would appreciate. Pike drifted in and out. He remembered snow on high peaks, the smell of pine, Sella's voice telling him stories in Chiricahua to keep him awake. He remembered the taste of cold water poured between cracked lips, the sting of juniper smoke when they cauterized the shoulder wound in a cave that night. Spring came sudden and fierce to the Sierra Madre. Madroco bled red fruit. Colts gambled in meadows thick with flowers no white man had named. Pike healed slow, walking with a limp that settled in his left side like a permanent reminder. The people gave him a new name, BDLDS, man dash, who dash was dash twice dash wounded dash for dash a dash woman. Children followed him everywhere, begging for stories of the canyon fight. One evening in the season when bears wake hungry, Sella found him by the river sharpening the bowie that had once cut her free from his own net. "I am leaving," she said without greeting. He did not look up. "North?" "Farther. The Lakota still fight. Or maybe to the salt sea where the sun drowns every night. The soldiers will come again. They always do." Silence stretched, filled by water over stone. "Take me," he said. She studied him, sunburned neck, gray threading his beard now, eyes still pale as winter water but softer around the edges. "You would leave these mountains?" she asked. "The people have accepted you. You have a place." "I had a place in Missouri once," he said. "Burned it down myself, one bad choice at a time. Found the only place worth keeping the night a tall woman decided a bounty hunter was worth saving." He stood, wincing, and took her hands. They were scarred and strong and fit his like they had been waiting years for the match. "Where you go," he said, "there are no roads. Only horizons." She smiled then, the first full, unguarded smile he had ever seen on her face. "I know a few horizons," she said. "Some of them even have room for a limping white man with 2 bullet holes and a stubborn heart." They rode out at dawn 3 days later, 2 horses, 1 pack mule, rifles across their saddles, the Bowie and her bow, a blanket rolled tight behind each cantle. Nana watched from the meadow, face unreadable. At the last moment he raised his lance in farewell. Lozana pressed a pouch of pemmican into Tsella's hand and kissed her cheek. The children ran alongside until the trail climbed too steep. At the ridge above the hidden valley they paused. Behind them, smoke rose thin and peaceful from the wickiups. Ahead, the Sierra Madre rolled away in blue waves to every horizon. Tsella looked at Pike. "Any regrets?" He thought of nets and cages, of blood in the dust and a woman tall enough to touch the sky when she stood straight. "Only one," he said. "That I didn't meet you 10 years sooner." She leaned across the gap between horses and kissed him slow. Tasting pine smoke and future doubt, then she kneed her horse forward. They rode north under a sky wide, enough for every ghost they carried. 2 shadows against the sunrise, one tall as lightning, one limping but unbowed, following the wind that refuses cages, far behind. In the canyon called Ojo de Caballo, the bones of Colonel Carr bleached white beside the rusted Gatlings, and the wind still screamed down the throat like a stallion that would never die. And somewhere in the ruins of an old stage station on the Arizona border, the last scraps of a bear grease net finally blew away to nothing, carried off by the same wind that now carried a tall Apache woman and the man who had learned, too late and just in time, what freedom actually costs. They never looked back.